In this lesson, we are going to be setting up the basic structure for the quiz. So going over to the editor, let's go ahead and open up a new file. And this is going to be where we're going to be storing our quiz data. So give it a name of quiz JSON. And let's create our quiz structure. So this is going to be an array. And then within the array, we're going to have a number of objects. Each one of these objects is going to have a question. So whatever we want for the question. And then the answer, so the correct answer, options for having alternative answers. And this can be an array. We can have multiple other items. So green. And we can add as many items there within the array as needed. So this is our basic question structure. And we want to have multiple questions. So let's produce one more question, and keeping the same format where we've got question, the correct answer, and incorrect answer. And what we're going to do is we're going to mix the correct answer into the incorrect answers, but we're still going to be able to track as we're building it out onto the page which ones are correct. So what color is the grass? And in this case, the correct answer is going to be green. And we can keep some of those other alternative answers. So that gives us our basic structure for the JSON of our quiz questions, and then this way you can add as many questions as you want, and the JavaScript code is going to loop through them and output them on the page for the player. And we'll just start out with the two questions, and then as we load the page, we'll take the window object and just make sure that we're ready to interact with the DOM content. So adding in the event listener, and the event that we're listening for is DOM content loaded. So that's camel cased. And then once the DOM content loads, then we're ready to make the fetch request to load the JSON file, so the quiz JSON file. Also, let's set our variables here at the top. So this is where our JSON file is going to be located. So having a URL, and we'll just make that dynamic. And then also we'll make our fetch request and load the data onto the page. And let me just correct that. So it's expecting the arrow function format. So this basically would just currently just say that the page, the content is ready. So it's going to output ready into the console. And also let's create a function that can make the fetch request and load the content, the first question. And we're going to load all of the JSON data directly into the page. So making the fetch request, and we'll do a full load of the data, and then that way we can output it onto the page as we loop through the questions, and we can generate the interaction all using JavaScript. So let's load questions, and this function is the one that's going to make the fetch request to the web URL, and then returning back when it does get a response. So returning back the response object as JSON, then using the returned data that we've got back from the JSON file, and then for now we're just going to output it into the console log. And we'll run the function here when we're starting up and the DOM content has loaded. Then we'll make the request. And you can also take a look and just make sure that you do have the data there properly. So we've got the correct answer, we've got a question, and then we've got some options for incorrect answers that we can load on the page for the player to interact with and guess the questions. So we're also going to need to have the questions, and this can just be an array for now. And we also can have whatever the current question is. So if we're on the first question, and we'll start it out just as we do with arrays, so that will be 0 based. And this is a variable that's going to change. So the current question is going to be 0 with an index value of 0, and we want to load all of the data into the questions array so that we can easily navigate through them and display them for the player on the page. So this is the basic structure of our application. So go ahead and create your JSON file with the quiz data, set up your HTML, and then JavaScript. Make sure the DOM content has loaded, and then make the fetch request to the JSON file. Load the JSON file contents into the console. I've provided a sample of the JSON data that I've created. So create your JSON file for the quiz. You can add in whatever number of questions that you want as we're making the app dynamic. Create your HTML page, add the event listener to run the fetch request to the JSON file, and load the data into the console, and you're going to be ready to move on to the next lesson.